Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Debbie De Pinto. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Deborah Jean De Pinto was born on December 15, 1973, and lived in Boulder, Colorado. She went by the name Debbie. Starting in 2008, she worked as a chef at the University of Colorado. That same year, she married a man named Scott Beaumont Jones. They had met at a New Year's Eve party 10 years earlier. The couple had 2 children, Mary and Michael. Scott only worked outside the home sporadically. He mostly stayed home with the children. Eventually, Debbie and Scott separated, and Debbie found a new lover. At this time, she lived in a travel trailer at the Ponderosa Mobile Home Park at 4475 North Broadway in Boulder. Even though Debbie considered the relationship with Scott to be over permanently, Scott was still hoping to reconcile. Before moving to the timeline of the crime, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, Delete Me. Over the past few years, I have covered a lot of stalking cases which involve a perpetrator easily finding personal information online. When people try to get this information removed, they find out it's extremely time-consuming. Fortunately, there is a solution. Delete Me is a subscription service that can eliminate this type of personal information that is for sale online. They have the straightforward mission of removing customers' information from search results and upholding your right to manage and remove your personal information. The privacy experts at Delete Me work continually to remove information from hundreds of data brokers. This gets rid of your personal data like address, occupation, marital status, age, names of relatives, and so on. How does it work? Submit your information to Delete Me, and their experts remove it. After that, they check every 3 months to make sure any new data get removed as well. If you want your personal information removed from search results on the web, go to joindeleteme.com/drgrande. Delete Me is offering 20% off their privacy plans to all my viewers with my code drgrande. Again, that's joindeleteme.com/drgrande, promo code drgrande. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On June 18, 2018, at 7:56 p.m., Scott's 11-year-old son Michael called 911 and said that his mother Debbie was dead in the laundry room at the Ponderosa Mobile Home Park. His mother was purple and cold to the touch. She had a bruise on the bridge of her nose. In the background, Scott could be heard yelling, "Please help me, she's not breathing." When first responders arrived, they found 44-year-old Debbie De Pinto unresponsive. She was transported to a hospital where she was declared dead. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. Scott told investigators that Debbie felt like the laundry room was hot. She said she was struggling to breathe, then collapsed. Scott's behavior in the laundry room, right after first responders arrived, seemed unusual. He suggested that Debbie's weight could have led to her death, saying that she was 220 pounds, and he told her she needed to take care. He also stated that she was using illegal drugs. Scott screamed and yelled phrases in a manner that seemed overly dramatic. For example, "That's my whole life in there, man. That's my whole life." And "I can't live without her. I don't know how I'm going to make it without her." When the police asked Scott where his 13-year-old daughter Mary was, he said he didn't know. As it turns out, she was seated in a motor vehicle next to the travel trailer. Scott agreed to be interviewed at a local police station. He said, "I love my wife and she loves me, man, and I have no idea how that blank went down like that today, dude." He and Debbie were talking about what they were going to have for dinner. Then she just collapsed. After this, the manager at the trailer park contacted the police. He had been concerned about theft, so he planted a hidden camera inside of a bag of chocolates in the utility room, which was right next to the laundry room. The police reviewed the video captured by the camera and saw that Scott and Debbie entered the utility room at about 6:50 p.m., over an hour before Scott's son called 911. The couple walked through the utility room and into the laundry room out of frame, but the camera still captured the audio. The couple argued for a few minutes. Debbie said, "We're fighting for over an hour over nothing. I'm done. We are never going to be together." Scott responded, "You are so blanking cruel. Is that all you got? Cruel and mean." Debbie said, "You're in my way. I'm trying to get a towel. Scott said, I'm trying to love you. Debbie replied, whatever, get away from me. Scott then repeated her words back to her in the form of a question, get away from me, before delivering a few expletives. He said, blanking blank. This rhymes with ducking boar. He followed this with blanking blank, rhymes with ducking ditch. Debbie said, Scott, don't touch me. You can't force me to love you anymore. Scott replied, I'm not forcing you. Debbie said, get out of the blanking way of the door. I'm trapped. Get away from me. You make me feel terrible. Get away from the door. At about 7 p.m., Debbie started screaming, and there were sounds of a physical struggle. Scott said, you're done. Debbie screamed, help me, help me, help, help, please, let go of me, please. This screaming continued for 90 seconds. Scott said, it's over. Scott remained in the laundry room for quite a while. It sounded like he was pacing. Eventually, he exited and brought his son Michael back to the laundry room to show him that Debbie was unresponsive. Scott said, she's done. Again, Michael called 911 at 7:56 p.m. The video and audio supported the theory that Scott murdered Debbie. He knew he was in trouble after doing this and panicked. He decided to bring his son in as a witness, like he was trying to convince Michael that Debbie died from a cause other than homicide. On the next day, June 19, 2018, Scott Jones was interviewed by the police for a second time. When confronted with the video, Scott claimed it didn't prove anything. He also asked, I need a lawyer, don't I? Later, Scott changed his story and admitted that he killed Debbie, claiming that he could have been temporarily insane. He said, I didn't think anything through. I just reacted. I don't know what the blank happened. Like a blanking blank hole, I just reacted. Scott claimed that he was mad at Debbie because she was threatening to take the kids. He called her cruel and a monster, saying, you don't know what she's done to me. You don't know the cruelty she's done, man. He continued complaining, you don't know the troubles. You don't know the pain. You don't know what I've endured. You don't know what that woman put me through. Debbie's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a possible smothering element. 47-year-old Scott Jones was arrested and charged with domestic violence-related second-degree murder. Eventually, Scott received an upgrade to first-degree murder. On December 20, 2019, Scott Jones was convicted of aggravated second-degree murder and child abuse. The second charge was for bringing his son Michael into the laundry room to see his dead mother. Scott received the maximum sentence of 48 years in prison for the first conviction and 1 year for the second. The earliest Scott Jones can be released is October 2053, when he will be 82 years old. He must be released no later than 2065, at the age of 94. Now moving to my analysis. There is no question that Scott Jones is guilty. Aggravated second-degree murder was an appropriate conviction instead of first-degree murder. He probably did not plan the murder in advance, especially in light of how he didn't know what to do afterward. Even though the murder likely occurred in the heat of the moment, there was evidence that Scott had been thinking about homicide for a while. A few people said that Scott told them that he wanted to strangle Debbie. He said this as recently as 1 week before the murder. He told an acquaintance that he had friends who owed him favors. These friends could take Debbie out. And Scott told an acquaintance that he would whack Debbie over the head and put her in the ground if she left him. Scott sent Debbie several text messages which were threatening or implied that she was going to pay. For example, you are rotten to the core, ain't no cop or restraining order going to stop what's coming, I don't care what happens to me at all, I am a man with nothing left to lose except my life. God is unhappy with you committing adultery against me, and if you keep offending me, I will rebuke you just as the Lord will. After he was incarcerated, Scott didn't demonstrate a lot of remorse. In a letter to his son he had with another woman, Scott was defiant and angry. Referring to Debbie, Scott wrote, "Now she is in hell. I bet she is a believer. Now, oh well, too late." At another point in the letter, he wrote, "Something tells me Debbie doesn't think I'm a punk blank anymore." And at the end of the letter, Scott proclaimed, "I bet she is sorry for being a lying, cheating, deceitful blank hole. Now I bet she knows I was a good man. Now too late now." Moving to the next question, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Scott Jones was self-centered, impulsive, lazy, irresponsible, insecure, angry, aggressive, cold, callous, vindictive, petty, deceptive, manipulative, had a sense of entitlement, and was exceedingly creepy. His relationship with Debbie was toxic. At some level, Scott made up his mind that he was going to reconcile with Debbie or kill her. There were no other options. He would not permit Debbie to leave him permanently. Scott simply wasn't willing to lose her, especially to another man. He falsely believed that he was a desirable romantic partner. Scott's investment in this belief was so intense, he imagined how, from, I guess, the afterlife, Debbie was regretting her decision to reject him. She realized how he was a good man. What I find so interesting about Scott's assertion is that the strangulation itself is supposedly the catalyst for Debbie believing that he was a good man and her realization that she was a terrible person. So the murder is what turned everything around in Debbie's mind. Scott truly believed that Debbie would be saying to herself, "Well, Scott did murder me brutally in that laundry room. That was a terrifying experience, and I'm not happy about that. But if I really think about it, I treated Scott badly, and he was actually a great guy. Wow, that strangulation dramatically changed my opinion of this whole situation. I really misjudged him. Furthermore, I'm an awful person. I'm so glad he strangled me and taught me this lesson about myself and about him." Scott had constructed a fantasy world in which he was justified in committing the murder, and his victim approved of the murder. He was simply reacting to somebody who was monstrous and cruel, a woman who had delivered repeated, brutal blows to his ego. As further justification, Scott used the fact that Debbie was technically cheating on him. When combining her cruel nature with the cheating, Scott possessed enough grievances to assuage any guilt. Even though this murder was committed in the heat of the moment, Scott had threatened Debbie before. She knew that he was dangerous and understood that breaking up with him was a particularly hazardous activity. She wrote in a message to a friend saying, "I have been trying to find the right time and situation to make it peaceful. He's desperate to hold on. That's what makes him unpredictable." Despite appearing to understand the nature of the danger, Debbie rejected Scott while they were alone in the laundry room. The lesson learned in this case is that the moment of a romantic breakup can be risky. It is a high-stress event that can push people over the edge. Debbie would have been better off simply telling Scott what he wanted to hear while they were in that laundry room, then never having contact with him again. Debbie prioritized the end of the relationship over her safety. Scott also had priorities that were out of order. He prioritized homicide over his freedom. This was a lethal combination of disordered priorities. Those are my thoughts in the case of Debbie De Pinto. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.